Fantastic.
There's a
Oh,
hard free version.
okay. Let's let other people go first. Oh, wow.
All right. Are we ready? Good? Okay.
Yes.
I would like to call to order the Ethics Task Force, Monday, February 24th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Do we have any public comments?
We do not have any vote.
Okay. Item 3, minutes, consideration of and action on the minutes of February 12th, 2024 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any changes? Updates?
All good.
May I have a motion?
That we accept minutes as it is.
I'll second.
Second, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes approved. All right, item 4, workshop, review of and discussion on the proposed revisions to the Code of Ethical Conduct. Meredith has graciously and her team prepared binders, so we will then move forward reviewing our existing code of ethics against some of the other benchmark cities that we requested last meeting. And taking it section by section. Are there recommendations as to which, Andrew, you had notes that you wanted to start off with? Or do we want to, is there a particular section that you recommend initiating the review?
It's entirely up to you. Did we not give you a copy of the current code?
You had it all memorized.
I didn't think there is one. I didn't see it.
And I thought of that too.
I mean, I've got my.
Yeah,
I think I have it on my computer.
That's like plans. Okay.
Do we want to, oh, we can't, I would say, can we pull a copy? I'll pull mine electronic, do we want? Oh, I didn't take it, I need this.
Yes.
That would be super helpful.
I was trying to think if I had one on my class.
I have one.
You have one?
Yeah.
Who all needs a copy?
don't.
I think I need one.
Raquel, do you need a
I
copy?
should.
Yeah, the one for, she gave me hers, so she might want. Thank you.
Actually, you know what? 2 copies I may have on my desk. Okay. Okay.
It's also that one. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, but I can't. Why not?
That's a good copy.
Just a gem. She was looking for a copy. Yeah.
If you wanted your training Wednesday, the BSC gets their training. We'll be providing ethics training on Wednesday.
On Wednesday?
The BSC, yes.
But it could change.
Everyone's welcome to grab some food while we obtain copies of the code. I'm pulling mine up electronically. I'm sorry.
Okay, I didn't have it.
Multiple.
We have to do, so now we are doing on here, that's the verification.
Oh, yes,
We have to decide.
not on this, usually I'm tethering because
I'm logged in with private Wi-Fi,
that's,
so
yeah.
I have that.
Holding for my computer.
So the chicken has given. And he called it goodness. So, yeah.
It's infused.
Mhm.
You make it.
I should have been looking like-
Ah.
Did you make all the Sandra?
Oops, no.
Did you make this?
I did.
Oh my
Kitchen
gosh.
All afternoon.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's,
Thank you.
that's impressive.
Yeah, I'm feeling, it looks like ready on, I wasn't going.
Restaurant ready.
I'm full, but now I can try this. I had a late lunch. Oh, well.
Well,
You know, you cooked it. Oh, thank you, thank you.
I didn't have time to make cookies, but maybe in the next week. I have to bribe you guys to show up.
Yes.
My problem is I'm used to
Shut up,
touch and
Mhm.
mouse and my other friends. Okay,
One of the shows, I spent 10 years shooting.
One of your favorite.
What's in the region?
Wait, do we have anybody online, like in Zoom or?
No, I
Okay,
didn't.
thanks.
She was there for the last Concur meeting. Yes. Doug will not be joining us because he has another meeting on Mondays at 6, which she's the president of.
I'm back on food stuff for bikes and me. Good. Thank you. If you're ever just hungry, you want me to bring lunch, always Commonwealth Austin Parkway, be there in 2 hours.
I'll be happy to drop you my home address.
That's why I wore a red shirt. Just to worry about something.
All right, Andrew, if you don't mind, talking while you eat, I do have a question. So
Yeah.
you've gone through the workshop to develop and revise, like historically. So from a procedural standpoint, did y'all do a reconciliation against the model ethics code or the state or any? I'm just curious, like what level of, do we need to reconcile it against the different templates to make sure that there aren't any gaps in sections in and of themselves, or we?
I think this office makes sure that we're not.
Required sections are
Right,
present.
and that if it says it has to say state section 176, that. We reviewed the current policy. And through that discussion, we started looking at other cities. And going, oh. That's a great idea, let's steal that. But also gave us stuff to look at, we absolutely don't need that because. Our city council and mayor don't choose members, they just say yes
It's
or
not
no.
applicable to the business that our
Right.
city conducts.
Yeah, so, totally. Good document. That's the first part of the test, is if you can't open that.
No, not anymore.
Are your nails getting in the way?
No, I don't have any. That's the problem.
Okay.
If I could get some in. Voila. All you had to do was imply that I couldn't do it and
No. That's just offering,
the task
add a
completes
pocket
itself.
knife.
Okay,
So that was,
did you hear my question for
I
Andrew?
did. So the one that they looked at last time was over 10 years old.
Okay,
And, at that point in time, the city council was the board.
okay,
And so the task force spent what, close to 2 years going over it line by line and, looking at articles, looking at other cities and probably rewrote 70% of it. It was significant changes.
You revert 70%?
They rewrote 70% of the
the
original.
original document. The original one, city council was judge, jury, and executioner. Well, that doesn't
Right.
seem proper. It's all your friends sitting up there. That's why we recommended the independent ethics board.
so it would help at some point if we do a reconciliation between the model versus,
They didn't really look at mine.
okay,
We had various people on the board. One lady had done, Sunita Ghosh had done ethics for a hospital. And then, I don't remember the other, one was.
Yeah, I think his name was tall guy from HBU. He taught us.
Yes, but a lot of people brought their own personal concerns and. Were able to provide input now, and then we also looked at other cities, and I don't have the file anymore because it meant records retention. But it was almost the top drawer of my lateral cabinet.
Thank you.
All the research. Well, if records retention requires me to get rid of things and they're no longer useful or meet deadlines, and I follow up with the secretary's office tells me to do.
Yep.
Because they are the experts.
What about, did they look at this, the guide to ethics laws? Did they use this one when they?
No, ma'am, that is new.
Oh, this is, okay.
So they looked at the model ethics, but the examples that are attached to this are the ones that you also specifically requested. Whereas before they said, okay, we would like to see something based on conflict of interest with this, and then we would go through all the municipal codes and find samples of that provision. And so this is a little bit different than how we did it last time. That said, we're still happy to do whatever research you'd like us to do.
Unlike that first time. we Actually. Tested and implemented policy.
Right.
Before it was all just theory.
As such, I would think the last division or article would need some significant revisions now that you've actually put it into play and seen how the process works. There should certainly be some tweaking there.
Oh, yeah.
And because it does get awkward in that first meeting when you're trying to figure out, go or no go.
correct.
That said, I'm not asking for any more responsibilities. I'm very happy to check the box and report it to you.
I mean, my name is. Always think it's a big, that. Well, I can toss out, I only have 4 things.
Okay,
Um. So one of the things that I would like to discuss, is that. Because our decisions could lead to a recall election. I'd like to think about, complaints can only be filed by taxpayers or residents of Sugarland. Because if you don't live here and you don't pay taxes here, I don't know that you should have a say in,
so what about a vendor, right? So like just hypothetically, so if I don't disagree with coming up with some sort of language that say eligible complainants include citizens of the city of Sugarland, vendors, volunteers, et cetera. So you have the representative population, you either have to do business with the city, live within the city.
because the 3 frivolous complaints that we've handled. Have all been filed by a non-citizen.
Our businesses,
Give us a supervisor.
Right, but the one against Suzanne,
Yes. Okay, the last 3 files.
right, and that person doesn't live here. Why are they able to interfere?
So I have a question in that regard, and then like discussion question. Do we think that somebody that does business in the city of Sugar Land should have the opportunity to file one? I feel like we should start a list, right? Like if we're gonna have
Someone
language
who
around.
pays taxes has a financial connection to the city. Someone who does business with the city has a financial connection.
Because that same person, is that same person eligible for your example, recall election?
So then,
Is that same person eligible to participate in a recall election? I would say no.
correct, yeah, so
I mean, only citizens.
the only thing we can do is suggest a recall. And then if it's, council member, if we're not at large, I think it's only the people in their district who elected them get to participate in the recall.
So if they can't participate in recall, why should they be able to? Do an ethics complaint?
If you need to back up just a little bit, per our charter, to have a recall election, you have to have a petition. And so there's a certain number of signatures of the people in the area that voted that must sign the petition for the recall to be placed.
So it's going to the voters should decide.
To whether or not they want to have a recall, and then once we have it on the ballot, then it's up to them whether or not they vote the person in or not.
And that's a valid point. So, it wouldn't be our position. It'd be
It's just that would be your recommendation for egregious misconduct, and you recommend that the city council, and on egregious, you publish it on the website. But it's not a guarantee, you recommend it in council, then puts it on the ballot.
And I don't
I
know,
like it.
I don't know if I'm getting ahead of the game though, but the question still stands, is somebody that owns a business in Sugar Land able to have a ethics complaint or somebody like that, should say,
Because they're a taxpayer.
not a citizen.
But if we say citizen, taxpayer.
They can't participate in a recall, but they can participate in a ethics complaint.
Yes.
So my experience and like my point of view would be if you could be harmed by somebody violating anything that's within the code of ethics. So if, for example, if there's a conflict of interest complaint against, hypothetically, if I did business in the city against my competitor who had unfair dealings with council. So there was a conflict, they didn't recuse themselves, they provided favoritism to my competitor was chosen for whatever it is. Then I feel that I've been harmed by somebody violating the conflict of interest. So then I would want to be empowered that I could file a complaint because I personally, my business or my person was harmed because they violated, they didn't declare a conflict, they didn't recuse themselves, they didn't, they basically presumably might have violated it and could warrant an investigation.
So you submit that complaint to the purchasing manager? You submit that complaint to the purchasing agents, the director of procurement, the purchasing agent? I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, so
Do they govern council members that don't recuse themselves?
No,
That would be a state law violation.
Okay.
Conflict of interest under 170.
so
But it's good to have multiple avenues to go
Okay.
after somebody, not just the one.
I feel as though, like, in the scenario you just laid out, if there is a competitor who could do business in Sugar Land but has no ties currently in Sugar Land, that person should be able to file a complaint. But, and I think we should be open to wherever the complaint comes from. Largely because there could be someone who has a legitimate complaint, but they just so happen to not reside here or currently do business here. It to me is a red flag that's worth giving people the ability to raise. Now, what would be considered frivolous I think we can probably, work a little bit more on setting some criteria for that. But I hesitate to be restrictive in who or how, what mechanisms people can use to raise red flags. Depending on where they live.
Your concern is it creating a barrier?
Yes.
Keep in mind doing that, you're gonna open us up for every complaint that any vendor has, and there's probably thousands of vendors that the city does business with. I'm ticked off because I can't do business, so I'm gonna put up with the ethics board. That's, my feeling is that's why you have management. You got a purchasing agent, you got director of procurement. If I can't get into, for whatever reason, I can't get into doing business with the city, I contact the procurement director and say, hey, I'm not giving a chance to sell my widgets to the city of Sugar Land. Why? It could be for multiple reasons, and he's just not qualified, he's like this, he's not that, but he's not.
That doesn't even fall under our purview.
Maybe a different review. So
I mean, a complaint might, but
whether or not they filed the form or whether or not you get through the door as a vendor, it would be a purchasing agent. But whether or not you believe a council member made a mistake would go to you.
so I came up with another option. If we don't go with something limiting who can file, I'd love to see a full accounting. What does it cost us? How many tax dollars are spent on a frivolous lawsuit? Or frivolous complaint? And should we put some kind of cost recovery option? If the person continuously files a known false claim, if they're just doing it to harass somebody, then say, great, not a problem, just letting you know. It turns out, if you find out that you're doing this just because your friend was picked on, it costs the city $4,800 to deal with this. If you're just upset, you can be upset, but understand that if you start eating up tax dollars, knowing it's waste, that we come after you.
It's this board's job to weed out that. I don't disagree with the last three complaints.
Exactly.
But if we start doing that, where's it end, and does our reputation get tarnished because of that? You know, what's frivolous to us may not be frivolous to somebody else. As painstaking as it is, I think we need to listen to every complaint, and the board decides whether it needs to.
Well, and you don't want to create, and I go back to your barriers, right? So I mean, that creates, what if somebody is financially insecure and feels that something egregious has occurred, but then there could be a perception of, that I did this intentionally or intentionality, and then it comes back on me, and I don't have the fiscal resources to, compensate the city. Like, I mean, you just don't want to create that barrier for somebody that would be fearful to
Well,
file.
and I don't even
feel-
know how you'd prove it,
That
how
I
you'd
agree.
prove they had the intent
Yeah.
for it to be frivolous, and then you go down a rabbit hole that I don't think was ever intended for this organization.
What about at the end of case, whatever the outcome, that we also post what it costs and not,
You're putting up too many buyers, you're putting up too many,
Yeah.
you want people to freedom, you want people to have the
I
freedom
do,
to.
but I also want us being used like the modern day FBI as a weapon.
That's why we're here.
Now, what stops us from being able to ask Meredith, can you facilitate a process where the next meeting, we have an accounting of what it costs, that last meeting that seemed to be wasteful?
I can do that. I am agreeing here with Mr. Trolley is that I really don't know that this is a dollar thing. This is an ethic thing. We don't put out how much the city spends putting up a rec for a DWI. or how much we spend on investigating a burglary. I think partly it's the cost of doing business. Yes, it may be annoying to have the frivolous, but I don't want this to be a board that looks like it's trying to cut costs, or they question the attorneys I hire to represent you all. I think it's just gonna be cost of doing business, and I would rather not put that out there. I'm happy to tell you, but I would rather not put that, I mean, it's public record, but I'd rather not tie that specifically to each case, because I don't know that's the appearance you all want to have.
Or just like, maybe if there is maybe some in between, it could be every year, we just get an accounting of what it costs. And it is something that gets brought to the board for us to be mindful of, not to tie to a particular matter, but just like just as an accounting.
I'm happy to give you those numbers, but I think those numbers are gonna fluctuate depending on the case. And I don't know that it's an appropriate comparison. I'm happy to tell you how much we spend, but I don't know that that's a valid comparison to any of the work you're doing. There is no cost to your work. What you're doing is for the best interest of the city.
All these ideas are coming up, trying to come up with some way of managing frivolous or vengeful complaints. And maybe there just isn't, maybe it's just part of it.
Well, that's
Is
what I
that-
was saying, maybe we work on like really trying to be clear of what we consider as frivolous, because there was a question that came up about that, right? So is this frivolous because they didn't do a good job of demonstrating or providing the evidence to back up what they were saying? Or is it frivolous because it's, for whatever reason, they just have an axe to grind? We just don't know what frivolous really means. So I think there was a sidebar conversation that was like, well, the lawyer might have stretched what was considered frivolous with the guidance that was provided to us. But I really don't know that, but I think as a board, we could decide like what is really considered frivolous and be transparent about that. So that could warn off things that maybe things that we don't want to review. That could be truly frivolous.
So keep in mind, as a board, we're tasked to do that, to weed out frivolous complaints, where it doesn't go any further. And define frivolous. I mean, it's frivolous to us, it may not be frivolous to somebody else. Are we picking on somebody? Every time she submits a complaint, we're looking at it as a frivolous complaint, so we're not gonna hear it. We can't, I don't think we can get down that way. I think it's our job to look at every complaint, no matter how frivolous we think it is. And then we decide whether it goes forward to the city. And that's where your cost comes into play.
Well, we're just saying, we're not saying we're not gonna do that. We're just saying on the front end, when we have to decide, do we want to explore this further through a full investigation?
Right.
Yes, no, at that point, let's have before us what we consider frivolous, have that defined, have that transparent,
Mhm.
because no one really knows how we're deciding what's frivolous and what's not. And that if we do decide that it's not frivolous, that would open the door for us to do the full investigation, but just add some transparency and I think some standard for what we really consider as frivolous on the front end. That's,
Well, maybe we come up with something that the city attorney's office has more leeway before it gets passed to us. So there's only 3 questions that have to be answered. Maybe we come up with a 4th or 5th question that would give the city the opportunity to make the judgment. Should we hear it or not?
Yeah, I think that when you start talking about judgment though, that gets a little hairy because they're very clear in defining like they're evaluating it almost procedurally. Like, does it meet the criteria for the procedures for it to go? Like this board is supposed to be the judgment call. Do we investigate, do we not? So if you put any of that back over onto the city attorney, then you kind of lose that independence for the process.
You have to remember that we are biased. I mean, these are our employers, these are our clients. And so you cannot 100% take that bias away from us, which is why you all are here. We check the box and then you are, like your chair said, be independent.
There's a couple of questions that have to be answered yes before, which. you
Mind
get the
informed,
complaint.
within a year, a rule violation of the code, someone subject to the code.
I mean, I'm listening and also reading exactly what we're talking about in this model case, and I think maybe if we review some of these other, because like they talk about here, yeah, like the ethics committee can, same thing as us, determine, it says right here, determine if there's an alleged.
Page 43.
Yes, top of page, this whole page 43, if we just read it quickly, this is exactly, because they don't talk about it frivolous, they say. At the very top, they say, yes, you can determine, if it's true, might constitute a violation, then it says, or determine no such action, but they say similarly. Ethics Commission determines that alleged violation is so minor, not frivolous, so minor that it's not worthy of it, but you know, I think that we could maybe change, and then if you read that next section in italicized, that's what they're talking about is. They keep it open, you know, and I think for that, and they even have a blog down here for more information about minor, or what's this, de minimis violation, the de minimis. I mean, de minimis violation.
Getting excited on Monday.
I mean, I think this, like, when you read this is like probably the biggest issue that we're facing, you know, and, it's a common violation, but I mean, a common issue, and that's what they're saying, is talking about ethics, and
And
I think the more we, first of all, hopefully this was an off year, we're not gonna have this continue like this, but I think, you know, that stance of we take this seriously, we listen, you know, and everyone that files will see that pattern that, no, we are listening to, they listen, and then they make an independent decision, you know, like, I would hope that reputation gets out there that, you know, look at the history of how this this board has been handling things.
I have found a definition under the state judicial board of frivolous. It says in this subsection, frivolous complaint means a complaint that is groundless and brought in bad faith or is groundless and brought for the purpose of harassment. And it goes back to what is groundless. Is that something for us to decide, for you all to decide? And I'm gonna think it is something for you all to decide.
but if we add similar language to that, maybe some sort of, I also love the idea of, and I mean, y'all can disagree, but I love the idea of the minor, like, we could also kind of assert impact, right? Like, this was something this big and with possibly malintent, and so between the two would warrant a certain decision forward. Like, I like merging maybe these two
I agree.
definitions.
Frivolous.
It has such a negative connotation. It says like I wasn't taken seriously.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So if we go back and look at the complaint filed against Suzanne Wambley.
We're not gonna go back.
Okay, all right, well, I'm just like, so that was over like a 50-foot discrepancy, was it 200 feet, 250 feet? Is something like that something we definitely want to deal with? Or should something as minor as that, where it's pretty cut and dry? So yes, the person who filed the complaint could do it, and yes, it could have been a violation of the policy, and yes, the person who the complaint was against is covered by the policy. So we had to get that one, even though it was pretty evident beginning that Councilmember Watley's property was outside that exclusion zone, inclusion zone.
I think they would value in the process of arriving to that decision. So the complaint was filed as it should have been, or is open to the public to do that. We didn't really know about these boundaries and the code that gave us really a standard that could be applied. And so now we have this understanding. And I think that makes us a more informed ethics board.
Visually, the person's building looked like it was very close to a project, and you can see where it could benefit. And the complainant maybe should have done a little homework and looked at what the regulations stated, but that's our job. She doesn't do it.
And the attorney's job.
And it turns out it's in front of us. We say, well, wait a minute. The person who's to complain against is within rights. It's like going in for a week stop. So,
But I think in your example, like coming to the board, having refinement of the language, adding some of the frivolous clarification with maybe the minor, like something could have been assessed based on that, right?
I think from the defendant's point of view, someone files a complaint against you, that's attached to your name forever. Even if you say it was baseless, frivolous, and toss it out. Somebody goes to run against that person, they can now say, oh, and my opponent was. Charges were filed against them. It's the attorney's office.
But the ethics board dismissed it
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
frivolous.
So you also have a name thing,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so they can counter back and say, yes, it was filed, but I elected to do the name clearing proceeding and ethics board.
so if she's telling.
Yeah.
That person.
in general. Not necessarily her, but I mean, that case was.
Okay, just a slightly different set of facts. You didn't like the last three that were complaining. What if they were filed by three different people? Would you, or if they were filed by a different person? Would you have the same opinion if three different people filed those complaints? As opposed to the same
Opinion
person?
as to the result of what we decided,
No,
or the same opinion of we
As to
should.
revisions you want to make. Take the personality out.
Yeah, having gone through that process now, and maybe the answer is no, there's nothing we can do. But I don't want to not approach it from as many angles as we can.
I guess my question is, are you mad that one person filed three things? And would it be more palatable if three different people filed a complaint? Is the frustration that one person was doing it? As opposed
I
to
think
different
the
residents?
Majority of frustration is that one person kept doing this. And we knew why it was being done. And still had to go through that process.
But if a different resident had filed that exact same complaint?
That's the question.
So
The
the
rule-
connection to who they were filing the complaint was still the same. Okay,
Yeah.
they all felt that somebody had filed a complaint against their friend, and they would do everything they could to
The facts,
get back at them.
And I feel like because we had this nice civilized procedure,
Yeah.
it dissipated all of that, we didn't, they were able to do whatever they wanted to legal, they could voice, they could talk, they could, and they had a board to listen to them, and we did.
Yeah.
We followed the guidelines, and then it was, as far as I know, it's done, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're sitting there,
Very nice.
yeah, Ms. Patel was talking, I mean, she was partly to blame for why it's right
We're
now.
not gonna go through the
Okay.
case again. The cases have been,
Okay.
we're not relitigating these cases.
the question on the table, the results would have been the same as three different people. I mean, all the facts were against people that complained. It wasn't because of one particular person. But if it was three different people, the ruling would be the same, my opinion.
And so then how do you legislate to address that? I mean, and I guess that
Maybe
was
we
my
can't.
question is, are you
but-
legislating against one particular complainant? Or are you legislating against the process?
So I think. I was on the task force to review the police department decades ago. And we saw that the complainant's threshold for perjury was substantially lower than the comps. And so we recommended that we even that. is our policy even? So if the complainant lies or the defendant lies, is there an equal punishment for lying? And I don't know that our document currently has it, but it might be city or state code that if you commit perjury.
That was an interesting hypothetical that we did run through in our office. Under penalty for filing false complaint or giving false testimony. That somebody found liable of violating the section will be fined not more than 1,000 for each offense. And it became a question of if a complaint was filed, would the person who filed a frivolous complaint be considered someone that this code applies to? Would I be able to check that box? And it was like, well, that became a very interesting question that we all talked around the sofa.
This is a governance question then.
Yes, a jurisdictional question.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, we weren't the outside counsel who would have to deal with that question if it came up, but internally, we were having that discussion of, well, wait a minute, does it apply to both sides? And so that may be something that you want to consider is putting language that this would apply to both sides, because we weren't entirely sure. You know, could the mayor have come back and filed a complaint against that person? Well, are they subject to the code? They don't meet the threshold, even though it says.
So procedurally. Interesting. So, I mean, hypothetically, you could put in language that said, upon submission of a complaint, you agree that you are subject to the same
Section 2-103.
the same standards and blah, 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 blah. Like, and that could be as an acknowledgement, like if I sign and swear, when I sign and swear, I acknowledge that my complaint and my testimony here from this point forward is subject to this.
Yes,
I think that's
because right now, all we could get you for is a penal code violation. We couldn't get you under this. And then the level, like Andrew was saying, of a penal code violation is too high. We would never chase it.
if someone's purposeful in false testimony.
Yeah, we wouldn't chase it.
You wouldn't chase it, you said?
The boundary too high for a criminal case, we wouldn't chase that down.
But I think it'd be fair, like, to say that if you're going to enter into this process, you should be held to the same standard of the process, or of section 2-103.
Back to the.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know.
Spartan was concerned that if I have to, as a complainant, sign an affidavit saying, you know, I'm lying, I'm going to jail or getting fined. They said, all right, if we make that change, all complaints are still gonna go through internal affairs, whether they sign the complaint or not. So there's still a method that someone who was scared of retaliation by the cops had a method of doing it, of making a complaint.
You're setting up another barrier. I mean, somebody may be afraid of that process now, if they're on the hook for $1,000.
No, but if the barrier is if you're giving false testimony, right? Like, I mean, I don't know that it's a barrier to say that we already swear them in, this is the teeth, right? This is the so what, so if I do lie, if I give false testimony, I am subject to the same penalty that anybody else giving false testimony would be subject to.
So I intentionally lied or interpreted a different way.
I think that's a valid question.
I have a question. This
I
is
would
a
be
whole different
intentional.
topic, but, to come back to it at some point, but, what is considered false testimony? Because, like, there was the accusation that the mayor gave false testimony when he said X, Y, and Z, but, was it false testimony, or did he just, like, didn't have his facts together? Or, you know, like, if you present something that's not true, it doesn't always mean that you intend to lie, right? So that, I think, is something we've got to wrap our our minds away.
I would argue that false testimony, it has to have intent and not a mistake of fact.
So how do you?
Yeah.
What is good enough evidence that shows
That's our
that
job
that is
to figure
intent?
I will tell
What's
you,
the, can you use that, you use the
mistake
term
of fact.
mistake of fact, okay.
I will tell you that this was a very interesting year for you all. The first round, the attorney let too much, that much evidence should not have been, there should have been a lot more focused on the point. If that had happened, the last two would not have come in because they would not have gotten so far off topic. And so going forward, there will be significantly more, let's, this is a carjacking case, this has nothing to do with, a money laundering. Let's focus on this. And so there will be significantly more narrowed down going forward. We have more rules and procedures in place for whatever outside counsel is to say, this is what you're getting paid for. Look at this and not, let's open it all the way. Additionally, you all have come up with, your list of procedures on what you think are relative facts. So when you ask for evidence based on each complaint, I'm not sure if y'all remember your resolution, but you said these are the type of information we think we would need. And so that should also close it much tighter. And so had that,
We cast a wide net.
you did, and because of that, I think that first led to the last two complaints being able to have been brought because the net was so big. So take that as kind of an unusual situation. It's yours kind of unusual.
It's the only year we've ever
I know, I understand that,
had.
but I'm
Which
just
made it
saying,
unusual to begin with.
it's a learning process,
Mhm.
and as we learn, we will refine it.
I think
I think it exploded.
we were not successful in putting the term, avoid the appearance of impropriety in the document. The council may be more open to some version of that. If that's something we want, and it could just be something like it.
Say that again, please.
So we had made a recommendation that the phrase be put in, avoid the appearance of impropriety. And city council told us no. They may be more open to something, and it could be a pinned down version of that, so avoid the appearance of conflict.
Conflict of interest,
So,
what do you mean by? conflict?
What we were hoping to do by adding avoid the appearance of impropriety was don't do something that makes you or the city look bad intentionally.
Doesn't pass this.
Right. And so that was the phrase we came up with, for the smell test. They might be more open this time to a more milder version of that statement. So nobody appointed or elected. Like you have to do everything you can to make it look like everything's above board. I think some of the stuff that we dealt with might not have happened if everyone, including us, is held to a standard of, put something on social media, you can say something, you can do something. Keep in mind which hat you're wearing. Says, because once you wear a hat, you can't take it off. If you did something wrong.
Where does that line get drawn? I mean, the appearance.
Well, that's why they didn't
It's so
like
gray.
appearance
How
of
do you
impropriety.
say, well, or how do you judge your behavior? Knowing that that's just an open area, how do you conduct yourself, whether or not you're gonna violate, how do you know what that boundary is?
I think it's juxtaposed about, we were trying to narrow some of the others down to like filter some of the excess out. But I feel like that opens us back up to potential, and I don't, excess isn't the right word, but frivolousness. So I mean, it's kind of too,
Monday morning quarterback. I mean, based on how it's the reaction to it is.
Mhm.
And maybe something like that goes into yearly training to remind people. You know, what you do and say, that's,
I just found a new word too for me. Vexatious,
Oh.
149 complainants. So these are, it's on the bottom of 149.
Oh.
Is someone who persistently files ethics complaints without having sufficient grounds, and then they talk about how to handle them.
Ah,
see, you can just comprehensive.
They also had, this is Dallas, they also talk about false accusations, and it sounds like they use an inspector general, and it just says, and that's on 143. You know, that they say, they tell the person if you're giving a false act, that it's criminal, there's gonna be criminal
Well,
prosecution.
so and to go back to that, do we want to like inventory some of our recommendations and like come back and kind of vote on them? Do we want to discuss it until we all come to a consensus on the recommendation? Like procedurally, how do we want to go through this, right? So we had a little bit of discussion on it, but like no finality. Do we want to just keep an inventory of considerations and then kind of at the end, like walk through them? Or is that preferable? What,
I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
that's what I'm trying, and we've got to make sure, because I'm capturing some of this, but I want to make sure that we don't lose it in discussion.
Discussed this for years.
Correct.
So,
Or do we add, you know, so we can add it as a final determination by us? It was with merit, and you did something wrong. It was without merit, and you said, yeah, you did it, no, you didn't do it, and this was frivolous.
Right.
Those are the three final.
Oh, I'm
judgments
sorry.
we had.
I was
Okay.
thinking of your 11 sanctions and I was trying to figure out where you were landing on your 11 sanctions.
No, so right now we only have three choices for a final.
I'm saying guilty or maybe.
So is it guilty or is it frivolous? See, maybe you get a fourth option of that, Nancy with on page 15. So you do something, you did do something,
If you could say that
You
word 3
prove-
times. we'll have this.
you didn't prove
Vexatious.
that they did something,
Vexatious.
or this is clearly this is my definition, but there's a bigger, better word for it here.
So to answer your question, Madam Chair, what I anticipate doing is I will be doing like I do with the charter. I will print this, well, I have a running document and I will put comments on the side. So add, you know, discuss adding this, discuss adding that, and I'll have running comments.
Okay.
And then we're also taking notes, and I'm gonna go back later and watch this and take much better notes. And then if we find examples or follow-up with suggestions, we'll bring those to you. At the next meeting, you know, you asked about frivolous, here's 6 examples of frivolous or vexatious complainants, and we'll come up with those and you'll look through them, but at the end, you're gonna have a document that as you go through each meeting, we'll say that this is a recap from last time, and you're gonna say yes or no, and I'm gonna either resolve that comment or leave the comment open, and as you go through, eventually, all your comments will be resolved. And Anjali and I will go draft up something for you to look at, edit away in that way, but you will have like an ongoing document, so I'll redline any additional language, you say, hey, I want this in there, we'll add that to the red line, and we will be sending those out to you, so you have, it's, you know, the document will be one meeting behind, but you'll have that in front of you, so that's how we look at
That's
that.
all. I just want to make sure that I don't want to keep having discussions and then either there's no finality to it or we don't capture it, so.
right, so that's why, so you'll catalog them, you'll fit them in and we'll see how it fits. And
Yes, and I'll have commentary on the side, you know, suggested this, and research the pages, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll look at those and you'll either resolve that comment, which it'll just be resolved, it'll still be there.
Yeah.
As the document just grows over time.
We've been at this for 15 minutes, we've been all over the board.
Correct.
So do we, like, for the next meeting, do we say, we're gonna focus on this section or this particular topic? And then we all come prepared with our ideas on a specific topic. And, but does that help kind of keep us on task?
Standpoint, to know what to bring for.
Yeah.
Well, and the other question to that end that I have is from a labor standpoint, like, do we need to do like a reconciliation between the Texas and our code, or is that something that your team does? Like, to look for like gaps in sections, right? Like to take the news, it's 2022 Texas Code of
The
Ethics.
state one,
Mhm.
that is for state employees,
Oh,
yes.
sorry, for either state, or you're looking at the model, aren't you? And I'm just trying to look for like where we don't have an entire section.
Would you like me to just print off table of contents?
I think, yeah, I looked at the
Yes.
model, yeah.
I wanna make sure that like we can start talking about conflict of interest or gifts or whatever the section is, but we wanna make sure that if we're missing an entire section, that we don't fail to have that conversation.
So with table of contents, then you could say, yes, we have this topic, no, we
Perfect.
don't, and then yes,
Yes,
because otherwise it'll take.
no, that would be perfect.
I can do that.
Alright, I just wanna make sure that there's nothing that's actually like a gap.
The table of contents would just capture all the must-haves for a good updated
Well,
code.
I will give you a table of contents of all the provisions, of the model code,
Okay.
and a table of contents for the state code. And then I will print off the table of contents of our code. Then you can line them up and say, is this covered? And we can go, well, let's go pull that specific section, but you'll have the names of them instead of trying to shuffle through 50 pages.
Okay.
And if that doesn't work, yeah, tell me what to do next time and I'll do that.
I feel like that's a good place to start, and then do we wanna go ahead and identify a section in addition to that, depending on how efficient we are next time, that we're prepared to
Yes.
go through? We may or may not get to it, but at least we'll have, that way, you know, if we go through the TOCs very quickly and then we can move forward.
Now, the table of contents, would it have something like just, I guess, definitions? Because that's what we're trying to get down to the bottom of in some ways, like what is considered frivolous, what is considered minor?
Yeah, so what it would be, like if you were to look at the model codes, everything that's in orange, like conflict of interest is one. And then you have legislators employed by the city is two, withdrawal from participation is three. So that would be the table of contents. And then you'd say, okay, this is that provision. The model code has it, the state code has it, Sugarland does not. And then we'll go, okay, let's go look at those, and do we want to put that in there, or is it covered somewhere else? Then you'll go appearances, everybody's got that. Gifts, refusal, and then we can go into depth. Like, I'm afraid if I put too much into that table of contents, I'm just gonna need to code again.
Okay, so that I think is a good strategy. I just don't know that we will. I don't want us to lose the fact that we have definitions that we have to get some consensus on.
Would the collection of the definitions happen as we go through the process? And so we struggled over frivolous tonight.
Mhm.
So then we know we've got to define that somewhere. But as we go through other sections, we're gonna have other terms that we're going to struggle with. And why, wouldn't that be kind of we add to our definitions as we go through this process, and by the end, then our definitions would then be up to date?
And that's
And-
usually
Okay.
I mean, policy procedure code I've ever reviewed, I do the definitions at the end, because then you know
Yes.
what's the most important or what's, you know,
Yes,
the most
exactly.
glaring.
Yeah.
I-
Word search to make sure it's in there.
Correct, and used in the right way, and,
Yeah.
I am open to feedback from you guys and from Meredith, but, gifts, typically, it's pretty like definitive as far as like number, dollar amount, it's, what am I trying to say? Clean, typically.
The box around
It's
it.
easy to put a box around it. I feel like that would be a great, between the TOC and the gifts, that would be a good place to start. I don't think we should start with conflict of interest.
Gifts are very easy state laws, like that, very well spelled out.
Do we think we could do, we want to do two, or just start with one and see how it goes? TOC and one. And see how we go, what do you think?
You got 1 hour? That sounds like a plan.
Okay. That's perfect.
And the next meeting is 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
2 weeks or, oh yes, we didn't decide, so we
You
want,
had surgery.
Next week from today.
And that's why we did it at 2 weeks instead of.
And then we've got spring break in there.
Yes.
So we can come every day.
Knock it out. Right.
If I bring my children.
Sure.
I think about a 6 and a 7-year-old doing code of ethics work. What is the date on that? I apologize.
So 3 weeks from today would be the 18th.
18th, okay.
You should say the 18th.
How does that work for everyone?
That works for me, everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were discussing this, to get a moment of clarity in what we've been discussing. When we look at a behavior or punishment, we take into account the intent of that action. Maybe that's what we apply towards a complaint. Is what was the intent of the complaint? And was it to right or wrong? Legitimately, or was it? The that's or that fancy word was,
Vexation.
yeah,
And they,
and so maybe,
and they can be sanctioned according to this.
and it doesn't even have to have a sanction,
But I'm just-
but I'm saying, we could just say. What was the intent of the complainant? When they filed this?
But
And
that can be refined, because I believe if I recall what I heard in the frivolous definition, there was some verbiage around something that you know is not true, or that you did it to harass.
Mhm.
There
Yes,
was some other
that one,
Groundless and rotten bad thing.
groundless and brought in bad faith. So I mean, like, I feel like some of that,
mhm.
I think we have to stay away from the word intention,
yeah.
because how do you prove what somebody's motivator was?
But we don't have a problem using that word. Against. Or towards someone that we think did something wrong. Did you intentionally violate this? No, okay, we give you a letter of record. You intentionally violated this. Now it goes to a higher penalty.
And we're still judging to see if there was intentional harm,
And so it
intentional
might be.
acts of unethical behavior. At the end,
That's something just that is discussed. While we're hearing, or going through the process of dealing with the complaint. As we. Pay attention to the intent of the complaint, or maybe think about what the intent was.
I think we can take that into account when we start looking like section by section too, like where does it make sense to incorporate it? Where does it not make sense, where it needs to be very clear and explicit on like the language as far as like what the requirement is, what it's not. So 3 weeks from today is what we're looking at, same time. With that, I think we're gonna close our meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion?
Second,
All in favor?
I.
Aye, meeting adjourned.
and you guys are welcome to take as much of that as you want.
It was so kind of you.
Good, thank you, Jeff.
Yes,
Very nice.
thank you, Andrew.
That was incredible.
It was good.
I want all that stuff back at my house. sticking up with Bruce.
Yeah.